I want to talk about history. For a while now, I have been pondering how best to approach this subject. I have made the same video a number of times now. Each time, I have approached the subject from a different angle. For as long as I can remember, history has been one of my biggest passions, so much so that I would end up studying it at university. I have always been intrigued by the past, finding it fascinating to see how the events of the past have shaped us into who we are today. Over the years, my passion for history has been tested. I have sometimes questioned whether or not pursuing it was worth it, and before I continue, it has been. However, it is these areas that I want to discuss with you today. I am hoping that this video may help others who perhaps feel similar to me to know that the passion you have for history is worth sticking with. I am also hoping that by discussing these points, we may be able to find a way to overcome them. I want to start this video by discussing what it is that I love about history. My passion comes from a natural interest in people. I am interested in the lives people have lived, and the decisions they have made in life that have helped shape them into who they are today. History just allows me to explore endlessly into that interest. The pursuit of understanding the past allows us to get a better understanding on how those that came before us lived, the struggles they had to go through, and the events they lived through that would help shape the world we have today. It is all of these points that ignite my passion for history. I believe that in every one of us there is that intrigue and that want to know more about the people and the events that came before us. It is a natural inquisitiveness. As a child who grew up in the UK, one of the biggest inspirations for history was Horrible Histories. The books and the show alike were able to teach history in a way that was both enjoyable and educational. I would suggest it to anyone who is interested in history. The first area I want to focus on is the question, what is history? Well, history and the past are two separate things. The past is what actually happened and therefore cannot be changed. We will never be able to fully understand the past. History is the attempt to try and explain the past, and is always open to change. Historians look at fragments of the past. This could be through a number of different primary sources, such as manuscripts or newspapers, and attempt to piece them together so we can form an opinion on what probably happened. This is what is so fascinating about history. There is always room for us to learn something new. Now let's add to what we have just spoken about. Knowing that the past and history are different, there is an issue with teaching or seeing history as if it is the definitive truth. There are of course some areas of history we know more about than others, and therefore we can give a more definitive answer on what happened. There are however many areas of history that develop over time as we discover new sources or researchers form new opinions on a particular topic. This is what makes this subject so exciting. We are constantly discovering new facts about the past. Now the question I am going to answer is why it is so important to understand the distinction between the past and history. The answer is that by understanding that the two are different, and that history is our interpretation of the past, this means that there are often a multitude of opinions surrounding a number of historical topics. This is another exciting point about history. It allows us to discuss and debate almost any topic. It is also the worst point about history. This is because it allows certain people to manipulate and abuse the past in order for them to push a certain view or idea across. This is why it is so important to understand the distinction. As a result, history can be very dangerous, and there are numerous examples of it being used throughout history in order to push across ideas that would end up harming others. Hitler is a great example of this, He used history in order to pursue the policy of Lebensraum across Central and Eastern Europe. He also used it to change the view people had on the surrender of Germany during the Great War. Of course, Hitler is one example of many who have used history to suit their own political needs. Today is no exception. Many people still do this. Sometimes it is hate groups, others it is politicians. There are a number of people in today's society that love to manipulate history. So the question that must be asked is, how do we deal with this problem? We must learn to understand a multitude of differing opinions. It is often very easy for us to be ignorant and stick with the view that aligns with us politically. Instead, we must learn to research and discuss these different views on the past in order for us to get a better understanding of what happened. We have to use all of the evidence found in order to form our opinion, not just stick with the one source that helps validate the view that we have. Now, being able to discuss these differing opinions today seems to have become more difficult. We seem to be living in a time where reasonable discussion seems to be less prevalent, as people seem to be too emotionally invested in a particular view, leading to shouting, and therefore no progress is made. This is an area that has to change, but how? One thing to note is that this has always been an issue, but has become worse in recent years. A society is meant to grow and develop, yet we seem to be regressing. Unfortunately, progression in society seems to be based on the advancements in technology, which in my opinion is wrong. We have become so disconnected with one another in a world that has so many different ways for us to be connected. We need to mark progression based on how we have developed as people. Technology has progressed at a rapid rate in recent years, but can anyone say that we are in a better place now than we were 20 years ago? Maybe in some aspects, but with crime rates on the rise and the number of people suffering from mental health increasing, have we really moved forward together? Of course, social media has a lot to answer for when it comes to this issue. Social media has meant that people who share similar opinions can come together. This can sometimes be a positive thing. However, it also allows people to become more ignorant in believing that their view must be right. Our ability to discuss and debate is one of the many things that help society to function, and yet we seem to be moving away from being able to do this. How is someone meant to change their opinion on a topic if they are too worried or feel as if they are not allowed to discuss it with someone? No matter who you are, your opinion on a particular topic will be wrong or maybe just misguided. Hearing what others have to say may help us think about our own views and potentially change them. This is how we learn to grow as people. To add to this, our ability to listen to what others have to say allows us to understand more about that particular topic, making it easier for us to form our own opinions. Instead, many discussions today lead to anger and discontent. It is so important to understand this, especially when referring to history. At the end of the day, the morality of right and wrong is subjective, and is often developed by what the society you live in deems as acceptable. What was deemed acceptable in the past is not acceptable now, and it is very likely that in 300 years' time, what we consider morally right or wrong now might not be then. It all depends on the society you live in. This is really a point that many need to think about, as it is easy to overlook it. This leads me nicely onto my next point, and that is the term Presentism. This might be a term that some of you watching may have heard of before. Presentism means viewing the past from a modern perspective. This has always been an issue, and many people do not even realise that they are doing it. I am hoping that just by bringing it up, anyone that does it by accident might realise their mistake. There are, however, those who do not do this by accident, but instead out of ignorance. It is very easy for us today to judge the attitudes and values people in the past had. As I said before, morality is dictated to you by society. One of the biggest examples that I can give is slavery. Slavery has been used throughout history and is unfortunately still around in some countries today. The British Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the ancient Egyptians are just a few examples of those who have profited from slavery. Unfortunately, many nations have been used as slaves, and I think the view that many share today is that slavery is completely unacceptable. However, we must be able to make the distinction between the views many held in the past and the values we have today. We have to stop viewing historical topics from a modern perspective. Now, that does not mean that we shouldn't look back on these events and learn just how awful they were. But we do have to put it into perspective. There are numerous examples that could be given. This was just one of many. We should remember that no nation has had a history of self-righteousness. Nothing in life has zero negatives, and that is what I have learnt to come to terms with when studying history. Negatives will always exist, but there are so many more positives to come out of history. History has helped us to understand more about our past, and the past of others. We have been able to see how the changes in cultures, ideologies, technology and society as a whole have changed and led us to where we are now. History is like a jigsaw puzzle of the past. We are constantly trying to find the right pieces to help us see the bigger picture. Seeing it in this way has allowed my love for history to grow and develop. I often think about how much I loved it as a child. My hope is that history continues to develop and as a result helps more people to see just how amazing it can be. This leads me on to my final discussion point, and that is how to get more people interested in history. There has always been a problem trying to get more people interested. There are a number of areas of history that people are interested in. Whether that be political, social, or economic, everyone has their own interests. The trouble is that in schools, none of these areas of history are really taught well. Instead, these topics are often taught in a boring way. The goal of teaching history seems to be to memorise names or dates, instead of actually teaching interesting and important facts to students. History becomes more interesting when taught visually. Being able to watch a documentary on what happened, or being able to go to a museum and see these fragments of history for yourself are much more interesting. Thankfully, there are historical YouTube channels, such as History Hit, that are doing just that. Horrible Histories is another great example of how visual history is so much more engaging and therefore interesting. These examples should be the blueprint to help more people get interested in history. YouTube channels are a great way to create documentaries that all generations can enjoy, and my hope is that these channels continue to grow and spread the passion for history to as many people as possible. If you haven't already, please check out some of the great historical YouTube channels. I would be interested to see what your opinions are on this topic. Feel free to leave your opinions in the comments section below. Thank you for watching.